Say what? Joyce Vance?
You know, bless his heart, right? Todd Blanche, the Senate knew who he was when they confirmed him. He didn't waste any time getting to work. He works for Donald Trump in a way that no attorney general has ever worked for a president. DOJ aligns with the White House on policy issues. You know, Barack Obama wanted us to work on criminal justice reform. We worked on criminal justice reform. What we didn't do was let a president evaluate the facts and the law in an individual case and decide who should be prosecuted and who shouldn't be prosecuted. That's the original sin that Todd Blanche is willing to commit.
Todd Blanche literally attended and participated in a campaign event with the president on Friday. Isn't he responsible for creating this narrative that he calls a false narrative?
Yeah, he's his Roy Cohn, man. And
dead on the money.
You guys might not know this. My personal home has been affected by Todd Blanche's stuff. My girlfriend was charged with a felony for protesting ICE. She faced 10 years in prison. And this case fell apart so dramatically that the government now owes her lawyers millions of dollars, literally, because they will not hand over the emails that proved that this was, basically a case that was created by the president's team. It is a wildly corrupt AG's office. They will, hopefully one day we'll get to the bottom of exactly how corrupt it is. That's why we need to get these guys out. But right now, these people are literally at the direction of the president going after enemies of what they deem to be.
The DOJ right now is investigating a fundraising firm that had been run by the daughter of the judge in the hush money case. The president himself attacked the judge and his daughter throughout the trial. So on what grounds can Todd Blanche possibly say this isn't happening?
Oh, he can't. And the fact that irony's dead doesn't, negate the fact that if you go back to Bill Clinton's term, the attacks on Janet Reno as being in Bill Clinton's pocket, or Barack Obama's term that Eric Holder was in Barack Obama's pocket. I mean, it's just they were so removed from the day-to-day operations of what the president, was doing, and they were so separated from them. And, Janet Reno was criticized for everything. Eric Holder was criticized for everything. This guy's actually working directly for the president. He's his former personal attorney. And again, we mentioned this, a couple of weeks ago. You go back to Watergate and John Mitchell, then Attorney General, goes to run the committee to reelect the president, works for Nixon. There's echoes of this here once again today.
Okay, but it's not just that irony is dead. Yeah. We're on the path that democracy could be. Okay. Blanche also said that the administration may take over voter roll cases and take them to the Supreme Court. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so this is a full-on effort by the administration to interfere with the election, to make sure Donald Trump can choose who gets to vote instead of letting American citizens pick their elected officials. And what's new here is that the Justice Department is willing to be a political tool of the presidency. DOJ, our view was always, we did not decide the outcome of elections. We investigated sort of after the fact. This is a very different modality, and it's incredibly dangerous because the voter roll issue, which has now been rejected in over 20 states that have gone to court and judges that have said, no, the president isn't entitled to collect voter rolls because under the Constitution, it's states that run elections. And so, Blanche can go to the Supreme Court with the Solicitor General all he wants. He probably loses there. But it's the intent behind it, that desire to leave no stone unturned.
I mean, I hate to come back to this, but when you go back and look at Watergate, right, there were all sorts of efforts undertaken by the committee to reelect the president to reduce voter turnout, to affect the candidates who ultimately ran against Richard Nixon. There were all these tricks, as they were described at the time. There's another phrase that they used for it that I can't say on TV, but they had, canceled Democratic rallies. They affected Edwin Muskie with the Canuck letter and knocked him out.
Okay, but here's the thing. When they do any of those things now, the free press, while it may be under duress, is fighting stronger, louder than ever. When the president tries to make these moves, the American people see it. Yeah. And you're seeing people enthusiastically want to go out there and vote because they know that voter suppression is underway.
Yeah, and that's the difference, is that hopefully hopefully, for the Democrats, their turnout will be stronger because they see this happening, as opposed to Watergate, which was kind of sub rosa. They were doing all of this stuff without the knowledge of the public. This is done right in front of them.
Quickly before we go, there is something that it doesn't matter who you align with politically. There's something that is infuriating the American people, and it is the corruption. It is the grift. What is your take on Trump's crypto company, World Liberty Financial, being allowed to become a bank, getting the preliminary green light from the Treasury Department, specifically a regulator that Donald Trump himself appointed?
So I researched this last night. It is not a depository institution. They will not be taking deposits. They will not be making loans. They'll be issuing stable coins. But the real grift here is that when you issue a stable coin, you have to back it with U.S. Treasuries. Guess who gets to keep the interest?
World
The
Liberty
bank.
Financial.
Absolutely. So if you get $2 billion in interest at 4%, that's your money.
And what is your take on the fact that we're hearing nothing from titans in the financial industry?
Well, because they're all also offering stable coins through the traditional banking system, and they're all in on this.
So if the grift works they're saying, well, it works for us too, so it's A-okay?
It seems that way at the moment, certainly.